Rabbit's face. Before beginning the night's work, Robin hurried into the garden behind his tiny house. He wanted to water his vegetables before night came. When the light grew too thin to see, Robin let down his watering can and crossed over into the front yard. He found in his mailbox a small brown package containing photographs a customer had sent. Robin clutched the package and rushed into his house to escape the growing night winds. Inside the dark room he had arranged in his attic, Robin prepared for the night's work. Once extracted from their package, the undeveloped photographs were immersed one at a time. When the first picture had finished processing, Robin examined the colored surface. He saw the smiling face of a tourist who had photographed himself before a majestic range of hills in bright daylight. Robin appreciated the picture, and particularly admired the rolling landscape this tourist had so vividly captured behind him. Upon closer study, however, his eyes were drawn to a strange figure standing on one of the hilltops far behind the tourist. Using his projector, Robin arranged a blow-up of the photograph with tight focus upon the far figure. Somewhat blurred by distance, it stood tall with white, sky-piercing ears. Unnerved by this unexpected discovery, Robin moved on to the second photograph. This one showed the lone tourist grinning similarly at the end of a wooden bridge. But Robin's forehead grew icy when he noticed the same rabbit-masked man standing at the other end of the bridge, just a dozen yards or so behind the tourist. Its hands were stuffed in the pockets of a black overcoat. The third picture, hastily developed, showed the tourist's joyful face as he entered what was likely a museum of some sort. Just a few feet behind him was the man with the rabbit's face, dangerously near. Robin could see the protruding teeth and whiskers. Anxiously lifting the fourth photograph, he wondered how much closer the rabbit face would approach. For a moment, the picture seemed insufficiently developed, displaying only a white surface. But a closer look at the image had Robin's knees knocking. A buck-toothed grin reached out from the fluffy whiteness. Robin dropped the picture in profound terror, but the sinister smile continued to haunt him from the floor. Robin snatched the fifth and final picture, wishing desperately to reverse his torment. The photograph showed no trace of a rabbit's visage. The scene, captured just before evening, showed neither a whisker, nor a poking tooth, nor a pointed ear. Only Robin standing in his garden. Marks. Old Maggie stared at the marks on the wall. She was in the patio of her new cottage, feeding her 3 kittens when she realized that someone had been periodically tracking their height by marking the wall with black lines. Old Maggie was aware of the cottage's long history, and it was hardly surprising that this familiar practice had eventually been taken up by a previous occupant. Beside each line was a corresponding measurement in feet and inches. The highest mark measured 5'5". The display enchanted Maggie like an elaborate greeting left behind by a sweet grandchild. Having tended to her pets, the old woman left the patio and started painting, a lifelong hobby. The hours flew by as she revived colorful scenes from her treasury of warm memories. In the gathering darkness, Maggie lit a candle and carried it into the patio. As she placed a bowl of fresh milk on the floor for her kittens, she noticed that one of them was missing. The 2 remaining kittens looked up at her with a sign of distress in their wide eyes. The old woman began searching the patio and felt her heart quicken as her gaze turned to the marks on the wall. A higher line had been added, marking 6 feet. Maggie's bony knees quivered as she struggled to control her icy feet. Guided by wavering candlelight, Maggie ran from the house and hobbled to the local police station, where she spent the night vainly awaiting service. She was disappointed to learn that the authorities were not exactly thrust into action by news of a missing cat and mysterious markings. She anxiously trudged homeward in the whispering dawn, falling into an unshakable sleep after locking herself in her bedroom. Maggie slept the day away, anguished by haunting visions. Early in the evening, Maggie lifted her head as she remembered her other kittens. She arose, lit a candle, and entered the patio to feed her pets. Maggie's fingers wildly clutched her hair when she saw a single petrified kitten quaking in whisker-tightening terror. Maggie followed the last remaining kitten's gaze to the marks on the wall. Another line, this time reaching 7 feet. The old woman suppressed a wave of dizziness with a fist of firm resolve. A clever idea was blooming in her mind, a triumphal plan. Grinning mischievously, Maggie left the patio to grab a paintbrush. At deepest dusk the thing crept inside, quieter than the silky wind. It searched the area for its third meal, but found nothing. Feeling cheated, the thing glumly inspected the marks it had been leaving on the wall, and was shocked to find a similar marking close by, a freshly painted line, almost reaching the ceiling, with a neatly written measurement of 10 feet. Frightened, the thing fled for another feeding ground, never to return for fear of crossing paths with a larger predator. He hasn't been the same. Room for rent. The shiny crimson letters, neatly written on a white poster, caught my eye and halted my step. As a traveling businessman, this was just the offer I'd been looking for. The moon was rising and I needed a place for the night. I eagerly approached the front door and knocked. The door opened slowly to reveal a droopy, stubbly man with sulky red eyes. I introduced myself and offered to rent the room for the night, but the man simply stared at me with those heavy eyes. A woman suddenly came from behind him with a warm smile and a friendly greeting. She welcomed me inside and took my suitcase. While she was away, her husband trudged across the living room to his wrinkly armchair, where he sat stiffly in gloomy contemplation. I remained standing near the entrance and examined the family picture framed on the wall beside me. The woman was easily recognizable, but the cheerful man next to her hardly resembled the bitter ogre now sulking in his armchair. What really stole my attention was the third family member, their son no doubt, seated close to the camera. He looked about 20 years old, very serious and firmly postured. I stared at the ghastly scar running diagonally across his forehead. The unnerving image sent a shiver through me, and I turned away in deep discomfort. The woman returned with a covered tray and led me into the hall. We discussed pricing, and I accepted a very generous offer. She showed me the room and placed the tray on the bedside table. My face went numb as I noticed a little framed picture standing on the table. It depicted the man grinning gleefully with his arm around his wretchedly scarred son. The woman soon took note of my displeasure and addressed the photograph. "My son used to sleepwalk," she explained. "It's a dreadful story. He was at it one night about a year ago. Poor kid wandered straight down the hallway and smashed his forehead against a coat hanger. That sort of head trauma really takes a toll on your health." I nodded uncomfortably, avoiding the image of her son and his gruesome mark. We exchanged good nights, and I turned the picture over as soon as she left the room. I felt lucky to have escaped her son's acquaintance so far. I planned to leave quickly the following morning before he could leave his room. I uncovered the tray and found a sandwich with a side of green salad. I ate carefully and thoughtfully, then emptied a coffee mug in what seemed a single gulp. Once my nerves had settled a bit, my eyelids fell and brought me to sleep. I was harshly awakened in the middle of the night by what I call the coffee curse. That is, the urge to use the restroom was truly overwhelming, so I pulled aside the blanket and got to my feet. My fingers located the cold door handle, and I soon found myself creeping across the dark hallway. I couldn't find the hall light switch and resorted to feeling the walls as a guide. Icy sweat surfaced as I imagined myself crossing paths with that sleepwalking Scarface. Then I felt a sharp metal fixture protruding from the wall and almost made a bathroom of the hallway. That must be the coat hanger, I soon concluded. Better watch my forehead. I kept my head down as I proceeded down the hall, listening cautiously for the slightest noise. I rejoiced upon discovering an entrance and slipped into what I'd hoped was the bathroom. I quietly closed the door and flipped the light switch. Before I could heave a sigh of relief, I looked up and witnessed the terror of a lifetime. My eyes gaped in horror at the scarred sleepwalker facing me. His lips were shriveled and his eyes were dilated. His mouth fidgeted endlessly below a bulging, empty stare. Worst of all was the scar, which still seemed to pulse with fleshy gore. I trembled with all my body, struggling to escape the tiny room. My hand shut off the light before yanking the door open. I flew across the hallway to my room. After slamming the door, I hopped into bed and lay there in a fit of wheezing gasps. The urge was gone, and my breath was uncontrollable for a long time. Slumber patiently reclaimed me, and I woke up in the budding morning. I sluggishly rose from the bed and strolled to the living room. The couple was wide awake already. The woman went to fetch my suitcase, and the man stared at me from his craggy armchair. I took special care to avoid visual contact with the family photograph hanging on the wall. I paid the woman when she returned with my things. She then opened the front door and stepped onto the porch with me. "Please forgive my husband," she said. "I know he's been short with you. He's going through tough times, you see. He hasn't been the same since our son died last winter."